Welcome, Mrs. Earwax. My name is Grania O'Monaghan. I work with the mediation program here, and I would first like to start off this session by congratulating you on just taking this big step by coming to the meeting today and trying out something that may be an unfamiliar way of achieving a better understanding of your current situation and achieving a desirable and workable outcome for all parties. Firstly, let me start by explaining how this process will work. Mediation is an opportunity to explore the issues between yourself and Mr. Skydiver in more detail than that possible in court procedures. We are not restrained by the law, and we do not have to concentrate on legal principles. During this process, we can discuss, explore, and agree upon anything you or Mr. Skydiver feel is needed. Also, it will allow us to ensure that you and Mr. Skydiver retain a relationship at the end of this procedure. My role is to assist the both of you to talk about your concerns and fully understand the issues involved. I am not a judge. I am just a natural participant in this activity, and I am only here to help you make the decisions and for you to talk through your problems. Anything that comes out of this mediation session will be something that you and Mr. Skydiver have developed, and you both will choose to agree upon at the end. You will be heard during the session, as will you have the opportunity to hear Mr. Skydiver's opinion and position, and explore the current situation in real detail. An important factor about this mediation session is that everyone treats each other with respect and shows common courtesy. This means not raising voices or using offensive language. It is also important not to interrupt each other, especially when someone is explaining how they see or feel. Everyone will get a chance to speak or to clarify anything during this session. You just need to make a note of it and talk about it when it is your turn. I am completely independent and non-judgmental. I will treat everything I hear as confidential, and I also ask you to do the same, just to ensure that everyone can talk freely and openly. I may take notes, and please feel free to do so yourself just to keep track of things, but these will be destroyed at the end of the session. The only exception to this is if there is any risk of imminent serious harm that may come to anyone in this process if I do not let someone know about it. Mediation is an entirely voluntary activity. If at any point you wish to stop the activity, just let me know, and we can go off and have a little chat and see if there's anything I can do to first help you in continuing with this process before just leaving it there. Please also feel free to raise any questions or concerns you may have about the process with me at any time. On that factor, do you have any questions? Perfect. Let me now go into further detail about how this mediation meeting will actually work. All three of us, me, you and Mr. Skydiver, will meet together and discuss what has actually brought you here and what each of you hope to gain out of the process. I usually allow each party to have 5 minutes uninterrupted time just to start things going. After that, I continue to facilitate a round table discussion before taking a break. From there, we can either meet on a one-to-one basis or back in a round table place in which we can further discuss what has come up in our previous meeting and help find possible resolutions. If at any point during the meeting you feel that a private meeting would help you further, just let me know. When we reach the point in which you and Mr. Skydiver have worked out the agreements on what you both want to agree, we will then work together to help complete the actual agreement. Agreements of mediation can be written or verbal, that is for you and Mr. Skydiver to agree upon. If you would like a written one, it is private, voluntary agreement between yourself and Mr. Skydiver. We can make copies for both of you, but we will not obtain or keep a copy. In fact, there's no official record of the mediation process or the discussion. However, the final agreement settlement reached in this process will be written up and discussed and then sent off for officiating by the court. Do you have any further questions? Perfect. So it is very common that during processes like this in which people are exploring and discussing difficult issues regarding situations, to feel uncomfortable or even get stuck. And there are such strong feelings that they often seem to see things differently. And it's very difficult to sometimes reach a harmony in this process. So I find it is helpful to have some guidelines, things that both of you agree upon in order to make the conversation and process as constructive as possible. Some helpful examples have already been mentioned, such as no abusive language. However, I suggest to people that you agree to listen to each other and not interrupt. That you are happy to keep everything said and done during the mediation process absolutely confidential. Are you okay with that? Perfect. And unless you have any other preference, I usually like to begin with the person who requested the mediation to go first. Is that okay? Perfect. Are there any other ground rules you would like me to incorporate? No? Well, you both know the situation at hand better than I do, so if you would like to continue with the discussion, and if you feel any other ground rules during this process may benefit, please tell me and I will try to incorporate them. Welcome back. So we have, after that discussion and mediation session, now written up the mediation agreement. I would quickly like to take this time to just go through the actual issues that we discovered during that time and go through the agreed terms that you and Mr. Skydiver have agreed to. So firstly, you originally came here because of a boundary dispute and a possible erection of a fence. And what we actually discovered is it wasn't actually the boundary dispute. It was the fact that the proposed fence could narrow your driveway, Mrs. Earwax, so much that due to your back problems it would cause you great discomfort and inconvenience for getting in and out of your car. But we also discovered that the tension within your relationship with Mr. Skydiver has actually been growing since early 2013, when you actually bought a puppy, and Mr. Skydiver felt that that puppy was excrementing in his garden and consistently barking, in which you disagree with on the excrementing in his garden, and you didn't believe that it was your puppy, but we have agreed on some terms in that case. And for the barking, you said it was caused by Mr. Skydiver's consistent playing of loud music by One Direction. Mr. Skydiver then also brought to light the fact that when you have friends and family come, that when they park in the driveway, they actually obstruct his driveway, causing him great inconvenience. We have discussed and agreed upon terms about that too. And Mrs. Earwax, you also brought up the issue of Mr. Skydiver's eating of takeaways and the way he disposes of them and doesn't put the lid back on the bin, causing a very foul smell. We have discussed this also, openly and freely, and I feel that we have actually come to some agreement on this. May I now move on to the agreement? No one has any issues with what I have said. So the parties agreed on these terms, and I'm just going to go through what each of you have agreed. So Mrs. Earwax, you agree that you will ensure that your puppy is trained to excrement in designated areas on your property and won't escape into Mr. Skydiver's garden. You've also agreed to ensure that your puppy's barking is kept under control and that he is trained as to not cause a nuisance. And you also agree to ensure that when friends and family come to visit, they will try to not obstruct Mr. Skydiver's driveway, and you will give him at least 24 hours notice. Mr. Skydiver, you agree to lower the volume of your music. And you also agree to ensure that all the lids on the bins are correctly placed when disposing of waste. And you agree to lower the volume of your music. And finally, as long as all the points that Mrs. Earwax has agreed to not erect this fence. I hope both parties also understand that anyone else attending or involved in the mediation will keep it confidential and treat anything discussed as privileged information. And you shall not disclose such information to anyone else outside of this mediation process. You also agree that all information disclosed at or prior to mediation shall be without prejudice, privileged and inadmissible in any judicial or arbitral proceedings, unless such information would otherwise be disclosed. If you both would like to read over this and sign at the bottom, and we can now finish our mediation process. It was a pleasure meeting the both of you.